This is an AQA Psychology A-level revision video for the paper 1 topic of attachments with a specific focus on animal studies. So let's have a look at where animal studies sit on the bigger picture of the attachment specification. There are 2 animal studies that you will be expected to be able to describe and evaluate, and they are Lorenz and Harlow's animal studies. However, the animal studies do follow through, and they are quite a golden thread throughout the attachment topic in terms of how they link to the explanations of attachment and also later on to Bowlby's theory of maternal deprivation, as well as influence of early attachment. So they're really important key studies to be able to use to link your knowledge to at least 2 of the other specification bullet points, which we will be visiting in future videos. So to begin, let's have a look at Harlow's study. So Harlow's study was on rhesus monkeys, and Harlow first observed that newborn monkeys that were kept alone in a cage usually died, but they would survive if they had something soft and cuddly to hold on to. So this is why it's called The Origins of Love, and this is the sort of link that Harlow was trying to make about the importance of attachment for comfort and survival. So what Harlow did was used 8 infant monkeys, and he studied them for 165 days. He created 2 wire mothers which had different heads. So one wire mother was wrapped in soft cloth, still made of wire but wrapped in that cloth. 4 of the monkeys received milk from the cloth mother. The other 4 monkeys received milk from the wire mother. So what's important here is the measurements that were made about the time that each infant would spend with the 2 mothers, especially given the fact that 4 of the monkeys were fed by the wire mother. So observations were also made when the monkeys were scared by a frightening object. What Harlow found was that all of the 8 monkeys actually spent most of their time with the cloth mother, regardless of which mother fed them. The monkeys that were fed from the wire mother would literally use that wire mother simply for food and would return to the cloth mother for that comfort. Also, when frightened, all of the monkeys clinged to the cloth mother. So that shows that what Harlow calls contact comfort is really important, and the findings suggest infants do not develop an attachment to the person that feeds them, but actually to the person that offers them the comfort. Harlow also followed these monkeys later into their adulthood life and wanted to see if maternal deprivation had a permanent effect. So that deprivation of a maternal figure, being deprived of a primary caregiver, which the monkeys were, because of course they were looked after by wire and cloth mothers. What Harlow found was that the monkeys reared with the wire mothers only were the most dysfunctional. They were aggressive and less sociable, and they weren't very skilled at mating. As mothers, these monkeys neglected their young and attacked their own children. In extreme cases, they even killed them. So what we can conclude from Harlow's study is that infants do not develop an attachment to the person that feeds them, but the person that offers contact comfort. So contact comfort is a really key term for Harlow's study. Another important key term is this concept of a critical period, because Harlow concluded that there's a critical period for behaviour and that a mother figure would have to be introduced to an infant figure within 90 days. And this is in the context of monkeys, not humans, but this concept of a critical period does then also link to human behaviour. After this time, after these 90 days, it was impossible, and the damage done by early deprivation became irreversible. So as I've said, animal studies can act as a golden thread because they do link to later theories such as Bowlby's maternal deprivation theory, and they're also used to contradict the learning theory of attachment. So that is the APFC of Harlow's study. There's now an opportunity for you to think about how to evaluate this research. Consider the questions on screen. this is your opportunity to pause the video, and then in 5 seconds we will look at the answers. So in terms of what the research shows us, well, it shows us a lot. It introduced the concept of contact comfort and how crucial that is for survival, and also the concept of a critical period. The practical applications are that need for an attachment figure, especially within that critical period, and that translates really well into social work, which we'll look at in more detail in a moment. But there are several difficulties that researchers encounter when using animals. First of all, using animals to study human attachments. Whilst monkeys are quite similar to humans, they are still not humans, so we cannot fully generalise the findings. We cannot say for certainty that human infants would behave in exactly the same way. And furthermore, the monkeys suffered greatly as a result of Harlow's study, especially into their later life, but also in that present period. Being taken away from their biological mother would have profound impact on them. He also frightened them to test how they would respond to being frightened. So several ethical concerns there. So looking at each of those evaluation points in more detail, you've got Harlow's practical applications in social work to understand the risk factors of child neglect and abuse. So massive practical value, and you would really need to articulate that in an exam about how useful that is to humans, but also in zoos and how monkeys should be treated. You've got the ethical issues about how the monkeys suffered greatly, and contrary to my point about monkeys being similar to humans, that means that they would have also suffered in a human-like way, which understandably is very traumatic. And then lastly, the theoretical value in how it helps us to understand attachments in humans, and as I have previously mentioned, how Harlow's study does contradict the learning theory, when the learning theory suggests that attachment is made simply through food, and the cupboard love theory, Harlow actually shows contact comfort is key. Moving on now to the second animal study, which is Lorenz. So Lorenz used goslings, and he was fascinated in gosling attachment when a neighbour gave him a newly hatched duckling, and that duckling followed him everywhere. So Lorenz then translated that into an experiment on goslings, as shown in his procedure, in which it was an experiment, a controlled lab experiment, as he randomly divided a clutch of goose eggs. He had half into a control group, where they would hatch with their mother goose in their natural environment, allowing him to make a comparison of any potential results. And then the experimental group, which he housed in an incubator to ensure that they would hatch normally, as normally as possible. And the first moving object they saw was Lorenz. So he was trying to put it to the test: will these goslings attached to me if they're the first moving thing? If Lorenz is the first moving thing they see. So the findings is that the incubator group did indeed follow Lorenz everywhere, and the control group followed their mother everywhere. What Lorenz also did to add a further element is that actually, when the two groups were mixed, the controls followed the mother goose, and the experimental group still followed Lorenz. So Lorenz found this key concept here of imprinting. He found that imprinting is restricted to a critical period. So again, that concept of a critical period is crucial here. In this time for the goslings, it was 2 days. And Lorenz found that if imprinting does not take place, then no attachment is formed. So again, linking to that need for survival. And this theme here for the animal studies is that attachment is crucial for survival. So in conclusion, Lorenz found that the imprinting process is irreversible and long-lasting, and he also found early imprinting does have an effect on later mate preferences. So that conclusion will be used for potential AO3s later on in the video. So considering the AO3s, again, similar questions to Harlow, opportunity to pause the video, and in 5 seconds we will go through the answers. So what does the research show us? Well, it shows us the importance of critical periods. importance of imprinting and the need of attachment for survival, which can again translate into the theories of human attachment later on in the specification. Lorenz used a highly controlled procedure, he used experiments, he used an incubator, he used a control group, he even mixed up the goslings to observe their behaviour. So really scientific methods there. However, they are goslings, they are not mammals, they are not humans, they are not a sophisticated species like humans, and so when trying to generalise the findings, there are going to be potential issues there. So having a look at these AO3 points in more detail, as mentioned earlier, the conclusion that imprinting does have an effect on later mate preferences. You've got other studies that have demonstrated this imprinting, particularly this one here where chicks imprinted on yellow washing up gloves and tried to mate with them as adults, supporting the view that young animals are not born with a predisposition to imprint on a specific object, but just any moving thing. There is, however, some dispute over imprinting as a process. Lorenz argued imprinting was irreversible, and that was one of his conclusions. However, actually, researchers say it's a plastic and forgiving mechanism in that it can actually reverse, and that the chicken study, once they spent time with their own species, they no longer wanted to mate with rubber gloves. So that can be one pure paragraph there, and it can criticise Lorenz's findings in terms of the reliability. And lastly, his findings have influenced our understanding of human development, and there's no arguing that. He has helped us to understand how attachment is crucial for survival, etc. But we cannot generalise these findings on birds to humans because his findings are not specific enough about human behaviour. Birds are physically and psychologically different to humans. They don't have high-level thinking and consciousness like humans do. And again, not similar to mammals. So Harlow's study with monkeys is probably a better study to use for understanding human attachment than Lorenz. Mammalian mothers do show more emotional attachment to young than birds do. Birds tend to just go off and do their own thing, and their infants will just follow them. So it's possibly not a very good idea to generalise these findings. That concludes the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful.